Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Pinky ISHA from the Department of English, Rabindra Bharati University. And today I will be talking about gender. What is gender? What is feminism? What is masculinities? The idea of transgender, the idea of transsexuals, and what exactly we mean by gender, and how do we react to this kind of gender stereotyping in society? Do we have any role to play? Yes, we have. Now, the starting point of gender studies is, as Simone de Beauvoir said in her very seminal work, The Second Sex, that we are born into a biological sex, but we play gender roles as we grow up. So the very fact that we are born in our biological sex entraps us is a concept which is wrong. What entraps us is not our biological sex, but the gender roles that we are forced to play by society, by our cultural, religious, by our social hierarchical norms. Over here, I would like to quote how women have been viewed from ancient times, even if they have been given rights in certain religions. So far as hierarchy is concerned, it has always been extremely male-centric. And so, if we look at the ecclesiastics from the Bible, there is this very famous quote I would like to comment upon, which is by the Roman theologian Tertullian, writing in AD 160, between AD 160 to 230 about women. I quote, "You are the gateway to the devil," unquote. And in another place, "A foe to friendship, an inescapable punishment, a necessary evil," unquote. So women have been allied to the devil. Women have been considered as allies to the devil in leading men away from the path of virtue, truth, godly connections towards the devil. And we know of the witch hunts of the 14th, 15th centuries. We know of other incidents both in Europe and in India where women have always been relegated to the background, where women have not been accorded equal rights. Even in our modern society where we are so progressive, we call ourselves progressive at least, don't know how much of it we actually are, we have always kind of divided males and females. We tell our little girls that wear this pink dress, wear this frilly dress, play with dolls. Whenever we are going to a girl's birthday party, we tend to take a big doll, but we never buy a car for her, as if the priority to play with cars and robots and electrical gadgets rests with the male child. So the male does not wear a pink, he does not wear a white frilly top, he wears a blue or a subdued moss green or a black or something with a cricket symbol, and he learns to play games in a manner in which we say that he's a boy, so he has to work, he has to earn a living, so why should he be at home? He has to go outside and face the bigger world. We don't tell always girls all these things, because girls are brought into cooking, they are brought into cleaning, knowing the housework. So we've ourselves divided the male-female, we've ourselves created the male-female divide through our society. Okay, so I would talk about these terms, feminism, masculinity, and transgendered categories in a very cursory manner, because there isn't much time. But what I would like to first hint is that feminism started with two seminal works, right? And these works have been very important in the history of Europe as well as in India. Feminism probably dates back from the 17th century, but as a body of answers to the women's question, feminism has a more diffuse and considerably long-standing existence. According to the World Book Encyclopedia, Mary Wollstonecraft's work in 1792 and John Stuart Mill's 1809 publications were the early major contributions to feminist literature. After achieving voting rights in 1920, feminism have seen a lull, it means a setback, Again, before it rose in the 1970s with women's groups, women's trade union movements, women's organizations, women's theater groups, women's helpline groups, vying for divorce in the law courts, etc., where women were happy initially in 1920s only with voting rights and equal pay packages. Later on, they realized that their ontology was suffering. Women needed to have more rights in the workplace as well as within the four walls of their houses. So even abroad, we see how women were subjected to this kind of male domination, and how you see Mary Wollstonecraft writing about women in 1792 published A Vindication of the Rights of Women, in which she depicted women as an oppressed class regardless of social hierarchy, and this is very important, even without considering whether the woman is rich or poor, whether the woman comes from a lower mediocre background or whether she comes from an upper middle class. She is invariably suppressed, oppressed, because by virtue of being a woman. So that this idea is very important. Her views were radical in a place and time that did not recognize women's political or legal rights. Therefore, women are born into powerless roles. Again, a very important and a very powerful line. Women themselves are born into powerless roles. In 1929, Virginia Woolf published A Room of One's Own. The book questioned why women appear so seldom in history and as writers. She points out that literary works are full of women's depictions, but in real life they hardly seem to have existed. In other words, in reality, women are invisible. In a chapter titled Shakespeare's Sisters, Woolf writes what may have happened to a female in Shakespeare's age. What would have happened to her? I begin quoting, quote, "If she had the ability, creativity and talent to write, she would have been discouraged. Whatever she had written," Woolf concluded, "would have been twisted and deformed, issuing from a strained and morbid imagination." Now, what is gender, close quote, now what is gender mainstreaming? Now, gender mainstreaming is where we are made to address certain issues about women in relation to men. How do we look at women? Do we look at them as human beings in their own right? Do we accord that same value that we heap on men? And what are the finer questions that come out without gender mainstreaming? Or what are the finer questions that comes out when we consider women in relation to men, women versus men? I would give you a few bullets which are very thought-provoking. Very few bullets. 5 or 7, and that does the job. Number 1, a man is socially superior to a woman. A man has the right to assert power over a woman. Number 3, a man has the right to correct, discipline female behavior. Number 4, women's freedom should be restricted. Number 5, physical violence can resolve conflicts within an intergender relationship. Very dangerous. Okay, this is the idea. That even if there is physical violence and it resolves conflicts, it does not matter. It does not need to be addressed somewhere else. The next one, a woman is responsible for making a marriage work. So it's only the woman's onus to make a marriage work, to keep the family going, to be the domestic servant all her life. First, bear children, look after them, look after the in-laws, look after aging parents, both on her own side as well as on the in-laws side, etc., etc. The last one, and very important, intimate partner violence is a taboo, subject to reporting abuse is forbidden, which means that even reporting cases of domestic violence sometimes becomes taboo, because we see that the police officers, the law enforcement personnel do not want to address these cases. They want a peaceful mitigation within the family itself, that okay, you have got beaten by your husband, why don't you tell your mother-in-law, or why don't you tell your own mother or your father? And it is as if the law isn't required for a thing as serious as wife beating. So there we are led to question this idea of whether women do exist on an equal platter with men, which is why feminism actually came up when it did around the 1970s. where the question was not to give special rights to women, but to give equal rights to women, but to think that women existed on a platter which should have been the same with men. Now, I would read out a few first, second, and third wave feminists as to what they thought about the women question as women were projected in literature and as women were projected in society. According to Barrow and Milburn, 1990, feminism is a label for a commitment and movement to achieve equality for women. J.A. Cudden defines feminism as an attempt to describe and interpret women's experiences as depicted in various kinds of literature. Maggie Hume in 1992 asserts that the word feminism can stand for a commitment to transform society. Feminism does not subscribe to differences between men and women or similarities between men and women, nor does it refer to excluding men or only furthering women's cause. Ruth Sheila, there is no one particular point of view so far as feminism is concerned, but Ruth Sheila says, feminism means to different people different things. It focuses on women's experiences and highlights the various forms of oppression. Now, there is this idea by Lacan that the father's hierarchy is the law. The father's identity itself is the law of the father, and anything deviant from it, anything opposite to it, is the woman. So the women are binaries of men. The women are kind of exactly the opposite of men. So if men are powerful, if men are courageous, if men are brave, if men are so-called mentally, psychologically, physically very strong, women are mentally, psychologically, physically timid, weak, unable to take decisions on their own, unable to carry on the promises and their ideas of existence unless without the help of a male. So all these things comes out. Once again, you see there is this very popular notion of feminism having emerged in Europe immediately after the 1970s, and how Betty Friedan in her Feminist Mystique 1963 attacked the image of the happy 20th century American suburban housewife and mother. How she actually rose up against that idea of women as complacent beings happy within the four walls of the house. And Kate Millett in Sexual Politics in 1970 objected to the repressive stereotyping of women by probing the differences between biological, sexual and cultural gender identities. She also commented that the power in both public and domestic life is held by males, and literature is just a record or reflection. Much examples in literature already exist. Men speak about women to men and not to women, because they don't think that consulting or talking to women about their issues is important. Women are important only as men decide them to be. So in the first, second and third wave feminism, the development of women's question was slowly being furthered, till in the third phase we come to a stage where women are deciding to assert themselves to a degree which is unprecedented earlier in the first and second wave feminists, where she thinks that her psychological, her mental, her physical prerogatives and priorities need to be addressed, and there should be no controlling force to limit that identity, to limit that the authenticity and validity of those experiences, which is very important. Once again, we come to the ideas of so-called male sexuality. But even before male sexuality, as I said, that there is already so much of gender differentiation prevalent in our own mindset, right from childhood, right from the religious, cultural, social mandates, and from all kinds of social institutions, from the school, from the family, etc. But even with regard to feminism is not an answer to equality. These movements were there. Definitely they did enhance the women's question. They did vie for women's rights. they did vie for women's positions as subordinate positions, and they wanted to come up to the fore. But when we talk about males, don't we see stereotyping even there? Don't we feel that males even are subjugated? Yes, they are. Now, when we talk about the popular concept in masculinities, there are categories of masculinities, like there are categories of feminism, like we have Marxist feminism, liberal feminism, we have things like radical feminism, humanist feminism, analytic feminism, écriture feminism. We have the terms androgyny, and we have the term gynocriticism. So we do have masculinities where we can talk about hegemonic masculinity. What is hegemonic masculinity? Hegemonic masculinity is a term which is very, very constrained, where you make an individual so much a puppet that a boy should be strong, a man should be a bread earner, he should be able to control his larger society, his clan, his family. He should be able to control his women first and foremost, whether it is the mother, sister, wife, daughter. He should not be able to show emotion. He should not have emotion so as to project himself as weak. So therein, a man is like a robot. A man should not cry. A man should not, laugh or smile too much. That shows his weakness. He should be very manly. Apart from the physical virility that we know as macho or being physically virile. But other than that, the behavioral traits of a man ought to be very, very assertive, maybe aggressive as well. If not to an uncontrollable degree, at least to a degree in which he can show his power to get his work done. So even men are stereotyped. Even men's roles are very, very derogatory for their development of their psyche right from childhood. And we have this very particular term, hegemonic masculinity. We have the term normative subordinate masculinity, an interesting term, where 50-50 a man is able to fulfill the work of an expected hierarchical male, and the other 50% he may not be able to fulfill, which means he falls short, being manly, being that much virile, being a bread earner, maybe having a feeble voice, not being that masculine in his behavior, not assertive in his words or in his capabilities in his day-to-day life interactions, which makes him come under the category of a normative subordinate masculine person, which means that he again is kind of terrorized by society to come to get himself locked under a category. Why is it so? Can't we have a person as he naturally is without categorizing him into units, into boxes, into kind of robotic figures where they ought to come out like some kind of a factory product, a factory manufactured good? But we do have study of masculinities where we have these categories. We have the extremely objectionable hyper masculinity, and very interestingly, Laura Mulvey in Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, a very important work, talks about how Bollywood, Hollywood have been, she talks about Hollywood basically, but I see the same trend continuing in Bollywood as well, where she talks about Hollywood being the carrier of this kind of a mindset where men are shown to be physically extremely virile, and due to their virility they can even rape a woman, they can even assert power and control over a woman by sexually controlling several women, not one. Yes, and that kind of an aggressive masculinity is sometimes applauded, is sometimes well appreciated, is sometimes considered to be the role model. And where are we leading our children of the next generation to? Where are we leading our boys to? Don't we teach them to have, shouldn't mothers teach their male children to be more accommodative, be patient with their sisters or their school friends who are girls? Shouldn't they be taught cooking and not to be taught as if cooking were to be reserved only to be learned by girls? The qualities of gentleness, softness, empathetic, being sympathetic, being caring, being very submissive at times to old people, to women, listening to them, these finer qualities of good behavior is something, the absence of which has led to this term hyper-masculinity, which is sadly applauded as being macho, manly, etc., etc. We have the popular figure of the Gunda as being hyper-masculine, but then we even have the hero as a kind of hyper-masculine man, except that he saves the heroine from getting raped or saves the heroine from molestation. But then in many respects, he's also the hyper-male. So where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the dividing line of all these masculinities? And I can tell you of one more category, hypo-masculinity, where a man fails on all counts, where a man has failed. Neither is he virile, neither does he have a strong voice, neither does he really have that thundering lion-like roar when he talks, neither can he manage the household, neither is he a macho man, etc., etc. So we degrade him, that we call that he falls under the category of the hypo-male, as not fulfilling any qualities at all. But maybe he is a very creative human being. We avoid that side of his personality. We avoid the fact that he may be a very creative singer, a very creative writer, a prolific, sports person, whatever it be. So these are the categories we need to think about. And then I would conclude my lecture with the idea of, quote unquote, transsexuals. Transgenders are a category apart. Sometimes due to some biological abnormality, transgenders are born, and it is very sad how we crack fun at them, how our society would even want them to go on begging on the roads and doing some ghagra choli dance and coming only for weddings to do the ashirwad or at the birth of a child, etc., etc. They live in separate colonies. They don't have access to education. They don't have access to jobs. There aren't government policies for them. There are no age-old, policies for them. I mean, age-old policy in the sense that some age-old retirement benefits, because they don't work. So the question of retirement doesn't arise. So have we ever thought that even after legalizing same-sex marriages, have we ever thought that even after legalizing gay marriages, do we or have we actually addressed this question of gender? Have we been able to imbibe finer qualities of virtuous living right from childhood, right from school level, in our own children, in our own families? Then we do it outside, but first we must begin with our own homes. And then again, who are these transsexuals? Transsexuals are those people who may have the biological sex of a male, but who may feel trapped in, a body which gives him, which gives him the vibes that he's more feminine. Maybe in the place where I teach in Rabindra Bharati, we have a very good, a very famous dance, classical music department, classical dance department, where I have brilliant young adolescent boys dancing the Bharatnatyam, doing the Kathak, etc. And sometimes even our teachers, it's shameful that some teachers pass the remark, "Egulo to meli chele," which is a very bad remark, because in classical times this wasn't it. The court dancer could have well been a male. So you see, we need to address these issues in the 21st century also. There is so much of gendered violence going on. There is so much of violence against women. There is so much of violence on children. Child labor is still rampant in spite of rules. So where are we leading ourselves to? Transsexuals are those individuals. It may be a girl who feels more manly in that she is a bread earner. She is more adept at decision making. She may control administrative functions more better than a man. She can address a group of men, and she can actually garner an entire team to do combined work more ably, more in a more better manner than any man can. She may have qualities which are humane qualities, but she would be considering herself to be a man, or maybe more like men, because she has been taught from childhood that being a female, she ought to be different. So transsexuals sometimes feel trapped in women's bodies, sometimes they feel trapped in men's bodies. Their gender roles are not mandated by society, which is why we call them meli chele, meti cheleder moton, meti tomboy. So all these things we come across, and I think that we need to address these issues broadly, coming out of our shells, coming out of our religious, cultural, social trappings and addressing the question of gender, because it's high time we do. And considering the age that we live in, I think we need to be empathetic, sympathetic. We need to be better human beings first and genderized identities later on. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.